Well, hello there. Welcome, Thomas, Crystal. Hello there, Rebecca. How's everybody doing this evening? Let's see everybody starting to slide in on a Thursday evening. Hello there, Decker and Nada. Decker, Griff. Oh, so what we got going on tonight there? Prospecting USA. So what do you say there, Justin?
Oh, not much. I try not to say a whole lot.
Welcome,
Hey
Leon.
guys, how you
Applause.
tonight? Yeah, good to be on tonight. It's been a heck of a week. Trying to track down between doing a guest and having my own show on tonight. I'm working with a new setup. I've got my laptop set up. I've got a microphone, changing things up a little bit. So hopefully it'll all work. If it doesn't, y'all know why. But last minute, guys, I was able to get us a great guest. I'm really excited. You've heard me talk about her many, many times on the show in Black Panther sightings. If you've been a listener of the show, you know that Black Panthers is one of those subjects that I am absolutely fascinated about. It's one of my favorite things to look into. Our guest tonight has authored several books, collections of Black Panther sightings throughout Appalachia and areas. It's Miss Judy Hensley. She comes from Kentucky. She's going to be our guest tonight, and we're going to talk all about Black Panthers.
Interesting. And this episode's brought to you by Appalachian Barnacle Company. Yes, Rebecca, you can smell my studio from here. I guarantee if you had smell-o-vision. If you got a loved one that's got a beard or somebody you know it's got a beard, hook them up. You can hit me on Facebook or Messenger. Also, don't forget, it's free shipping for the month of February. And if you buy anything, when the Grizzly line comes out, you are my guinea pig. So let's welcome Judith to the show. How you doing there?
Hey.
Good so introduce yourself. Tell everybody all about you.
Well, where would you like me to start? With the Panther?
Just a quick bio. Let's start with a quick bio so we know who you are.
Okay. I live in southeastern Kentucky in the mountains. I was born here but grew up just outside of Chicago. So my Appalachian heritage has always been really important to me. And one of my favorite things when we would come to visit relatives was to listen to the big tales that they would tell around a fireplace or on the back porch. So my first interest in Black Panthers came as a child sitting on the back porch and hearing them scream from ridge to ridge. And my grandfather would say, that's just that old wampus. They can't get you. As long as you're here with us, you'll be all right. They can't get you. So anyhow, I taught school for 30 years in Harlan County. I've authored about somewhere between 40 and 50 books. 3 of those are dedicated to Panther tales, interviews and contact with people who are direct eyewitnesses, a few who say they heard them, and somebody else identified the creature as a Black Panther. But I have personally witnessed myself on at least 6 different occasions. So that's what got me interested to start with. The first one I saw in person was around 1974 in McCurry County, Kentucky, at a place called Monkey's Eyebrow.
Interesting.
Monkey's Eyebrow. That's awesome. I didn't realize you had so many books out, Miss Judy. I know when I was up with the COVID, you sent several books for me to read through, and I still have those and cherish those. I didn't realize you were up to like 40 or 50 books already.
I've got quite a few. That's what you do after you retire, you know? Got to do something to keep your brain from drying up.
I just want to say to the audience, Miss Judy is somebody I know personally. We've met, we've talked, we've had breakfast together. She's really good friends with my fiance, Jennifer. In fact, they're known to hightail it out to the high country out there in Harlan and look for bears and go out into the woods and look for critters. So Miss Judy is definitely an Appalachia girl, and I love the few times we've been able to get and just talk and hang out. So Black Panthers. Well, first I want to bring this up. You mentioned Wampus cats. Now, cryptozoologically speaking, a Wampus cat is different than a Black Panther. Is that correct?
Well, I think some people just use the term interchangeably with any big unidentified mountain cat. Could be a bobcat, which I've seen plenty of. Could be, some people report seeing cougar type cats, and then people see the Black Panthers. And so some people just use the term interchangeably.
Okay, yeah. And that's the big difference, guys, between academically looking at something, right? Whether it be Bigfoot or a big cat or something, right? Because if you go online and you do a search on Wampus cat, which I've done, you get a Cherokee legend about a lady who was like spurned and she transforms into a cat woman. And that's a Wampus cat. Some people say there's a specific wild cat out there. Yeah, Roger, there you go, connected to the Cherokee. That there is a specific large cat that is currently undescribed by science. That is a Wampus cat. I have heard of these descriptions. It's kind of like a little bit smaller than a mountain lion, but one of the distinctive features is it has a very reddish coat and tufted ears, if you're looking at a natural animal. And then we have the Black Panther. And yet, colloquially, it's just like terms with Bigfoot, like Wampus cat is being used as a general descriptor, and then that's a big difference when you're talking to somebody who lives in an area and experiences things on the regular and generationally versus academically speaking. And that's an important part to understand and research, is there is a difference between the two. There really is. Just wanted to point that out. So Wampus cats and Black Panthers. So Black Panthers, let's kind of start with a history of Black Panthers. Like, how long have these been going on? Like give us some historical context here when it comes to Black Panthers.
Well, in the oral legends, like you said, starting with the Native American indigenous people to the region, there were always tales. And my biggest argument to anybody who's just flat out denies that they could possibly exist and that cougars have no melanistic phase and all of the scientific jargon is that the Native Americans, indigenous people who recorded their stories orally or artwork and included these creatures, they weren't doing it to entertain people in 2024. They were recording what they saw, what they believed. They weren't making up tales and, trying to scare people in 2024 or argue with scientists or biology teachers. They were recording what they saw. And also the explorers that were, the European explorers that were in the region at that time also recorded sightings of these cats. So that's about as far back as I know the origins.
Sure. And, it's funny because I never did not think there were Black Panthers. I grew up in the Amazon. We had jaguars. We had black jaguars. That was a thing. And so coming to the States, it was never a question for me that there was such a thing as Black Panther. But let's get to the scientific side of this, okay? Of the 40 known cat species out there, 14 of them are known to have the melanistic mutation in the gene. I can't remember the name of the gene off the top of my head, CR14 or 146, something like that. There's a very specific gene, but it's not in every cat species, okay? And what we commonly refer to as a Black Panther is generally either a melanistic leopard in Asia or a melanistic jaguar in South America. And even then, the two genes don't present themselves the same way. I was doing a little bit of research here before the show, and in jaguars, the melanistic gene mutation is a dominant trait, where in leopards, it's a recessive trait. and then so it presents itself differently. So historically speaking, in North America, we don't have leopards, we have jaguars. And jaguars are a southern critter. We had them in South America. They're known to travel up as far as Mexico. And we are starting to get reports in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, that quadrant of the states, right? So if somebody is reporting a black panther, which we're going to just use the idea of a large black cat as the black panther, in those regions, then we could, say, well, that's probably going to be a jaguar. But when we're talking Appalachia, we're talking Kentucky, we're talking Tennessee, we're talking Pennsylvania. Jaguars don't go that far north. That's not part of their territory. That's not part of their range. And so we can either the black panthers are jaguars that are extremely out of their known biological range into territory and climates that they're not adapted to, or there is something else going on. Those are really basically the only two explanations. Now, when it comes to mountain lions or cougars or pumas or whatever you want to call them, depending on what region you're from, scientifically speaking, and Miss Judy touched on this, there has never, ever, ever been a confirmed case of a mountain lion having the melanistic gene. There has never been one in a zoo. There's never been one captured scientifically. There's never been a taxidermy one. There has never been a confirmed mountain lion having the genetic disposition to be black. It's called melanism. It's never happened. Genetically speaking, they don't have the trait. So what that tells me that for black cats, a mountain lion is kind of out of the picture. Now, that's not saying that I don't believe in black panthers, because I firmly do. I believe there's something else going on to the phenomenon. I don't believe they're black mountain lions. Could they be? Sure, it is possible. But as of right now, according to our scientific knowledge, it doesn't happen. But I believe the hundreds of reports, thousands of reports going back hundreds of years saying that these animals exist. And the first time I ever heard of one in the United States, and people laugh at me when I tell them this, was in the book the Little House on the Prairie books. There's a reference in there of a black panther. They could hear it screaming at night, and she referenced that it traveled through the trees. And that's, for me, that's one of the earliest ones that we're talking about. Do you know that reference, Miss Judy, from Little House on the Prairie?
Well, of course, as a teacher, I've, read all of them. I hadn't really recalled the significance of that until you said it. But I've also heard people in this region tell stories of black panthers who stalked them on the trail, but not on the ground. They went from treetop to treetop.
There you go, which again is not a known mountain lion behavior. They're not considered to be arboreal. They can climb trees, but from going from tree to tree to tree to tree, that's not typical behavior. Which to me is just that, another caveat that this isn't specifically a mountain lion.
Need to take into consideration that in the pioneer days, in the late 1800s or early 1900s, the size of trees, virgin timber in this region of Appalachia was just everywhere. Before the timber companies came in and extracted, these trees were massive. And so my dad used to describe it like walking under an umbrella, that the forest floor would be maybe have pine needles and leaves, but the canopy was so thick overhead that it was actually more like a carpeted, mossy area. It wasn't full of scrub and briars. And so the tree branches just, interlocked in the canopy would have been an easy thing for a big cat to travel that way.
Absolutely. If you've ever been out hiking and stumbled across a forest, old growth area, you know exactly what she's talking about, where the canopy is so thick that you're not having all the excess sunshine coming down, allowing the forest, to grow that undergrowth. And I think those places are almost magical. You know what I mean? They're absolutely gorgeous and beautiful and calm and serene. But you're right, there definitely could be a pathway. And historically, I mean, mountain lions could have traveled that way. They're known for traveling through, mountains and stuff like that. But again, when it comes to mountain lions, it's currently not something they exhibit. What are some of the oldest stories that you can clearly recall from Black Panthers? Like, let's start talking. How far back are we really talking here for American settlers? Like, from the beginning, do we have recorded accounts of Black Panthers?
Yes. In the travel logs of different explorers, there was mention made. I'm afraid to be really, really specific, but like Thomas Walker, Lewis and Clark, and they had Indian guides. They had, who was the artist that went west and captured a lot of those things? Was it?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who the artist was, but anyhow, personal stories. My grandfather was born in the 1890s, and so he had personal accounts plus accounts of his father and grandfather, which would have put it back, like pre-Civil War. And so it wasn't like a big deal. It was a commonality that they all just accepted as a part of life in the mountains, the same as bears or deer or rabbits or fox or raccoons or anything else that was roaming in the wilderness. Black Panthers were just on that list. They did just not acknowledge it as anything unusual or different. I can tell you a great story. I just recalled of a lady back in the 1800s who was crossing the mountain from Kentucky into Virginia, from Harlan County area into Rose Hill, Ewing area in Virginia, across the White Rocks. And she told her husband, that she had a panther stalking her and her children as they were coming across that way. Well, he had to be gone. He took the gun and the ammunition. He had to be gone, and for some reason she had to cross the mountain. All she had was a butcher knife. All she had with her was a butcher knife. But she knew that cat was in the area that they had to pass through. So when it came out, made its presence known, she was ready for the cat, and she, shooed the children away and stabbed it with a butcher knife. That's all that she had to do, stabbed it with a butcher knife. Another tale was about somebody on horseback that had children, that had family following, and when the panther came out, they threw a baby to the panther in order to rescue the rest of the family. Tales, I wasn't there. I can't verify that. That one's pretty harsh, but I've heard a lot of interesting stories over the years.
Well, I mean, back then life was totally different, and if you had an infant that survived past 2 years, that was kind of a big thing anyway. You know what I mean? So, I mean, we can't understand that mindset of throwing the baby to distract the cat so the rest of the people can get away. But I can understand the times back then where that could be a little more ready in your mind kind of a thing. I mean, either way, it's a horrible thing, and I'm sure it wasn't something they enjoyed doing. But, it was a different time and a different culture. We can't really judge that because we've never experienced that. It's interesting you mentioned crossing the mountains over to Virginia. I know a tale that's told to me from a guy who has family in that area for generations about encountering large cats in the mountains, probably maybe not the same mountains, but between Kentucky and Virginia. And it's an interesting tie-in because what he experienced was described as African lions, like big male African lions with manes. And the reason it's interesting is because, for one, it's in the same basic Kentucky to Virginia border. And if it's from the Harlan side, they're fairly close to each other within a range or two. But what's interesting is Lauren Coleman, the cryptozoologist, author, he's a college professor. He puts forth a theory that what the black cats actually are part of a remnant population of the American lion. Okay. So what he postulates is that the black cats are female, melanistic American lions. And he puts this because, again, we know, as of we know right now, scientifically speaking, genetically speaking, the mountain lions can't be black. And so he says people are seeing African lions. There's lots of reports. We haven't really talked about that, but that this is a remnant population of American cave lions. And that's the only real theory that I've ever heard put forth that would explain what we see. Because really, there are no good theories at this point. Nobody can say, hey, I think this is what's happening, other than, escape circus animals or stuff like that, right? Because that's what people like to say for everything. It's an escape circus animal. But I think it's an interesting theory. It's an interesting idea that I think deserves at least looking into a little more. I had told you backstage that I had personally gotten 2 different Black Panther reports out of where I was at in the Gatlinburg, Sevierville area in Tennessee. And these sightings, I mean, it's kind of like having a Bigfoot sighting, right? I know you've authored some books on Bigfoot as well. And a lot of them are just either they don't know that they're not supposed to be seeing what they're seeing, that it doesn't exist, or it happens so fast, right? So the one I got from Cosby, Tennessee, and it was interesting because I was just part of a hiking group, a Tennessee Smoky Mountain National Park hiking group. And somebody had posted on there and said, hey, guys, like, anybody know about, Black Panthers in the area, kind of a thing. And so I immediately latched onto it and started questioning him. And this guy was like, yeah, I just come off a trailhead out in Cosby. I got into my car and I was just leaving the area when this big black cat ran out in front of me and then turned around and ran back into the forest on the side of the road. And he was like, I was just wondering if anybody else had seen that up there. I think people need to be careful. And I started asking him the questions, and he said this thing was larger than like a lab dog. It was jet black. It had a long tail. He was no mistaking it for what it was. And he didn't even have any understanding of like how special what he saw was. He was just like, what are you talking about? It's a Black Panther. I hear people see these things from time to time. What's the big deal? And it's like, wow. And then talking to another lady, researching a different case on something altogether, she was talking about how she was a younger child living with her grandma on the Little Pigeon River down there in Sevierville, that they had a family of Black Panthers. She saw a mom and cubs on the regular outside of her grandma's house, walking along the riverbanks and in the low bottom area there. Like she said you could see their tails sometimes flapping in the grass and stuff. Like they were there, and it was just a common thing to see them. But she reports, and this is interesting, that the local wildlife officers knew about it. And in fact, they had tagged the mother and was doing research on the mother. And she said she even talked to the officer one time about them tracking them and all this kind of stuff, which I found fascinating because I have never heard any reports of the wildlife officers being involved in tracking these or even admitting.
Oh my goodness. We've had so many stories in Harlan County where people tried to report it, where they saw one, they tried to report it, try to get it documented, try to get help, or scared because they saw one family it came into the yard and carried off a dog. So of course they reported it. And when the wildlife people got there, they told them the whole thing. They actually had a video. And so they came back later with other officials from somewhere else unknown. They asked if they could borrow the video, borrow the pictures, borrow the video.
Wow.
That was the last they ever heard of anything about it. They never came back, never got their material back. But the thing, I've been laughed at, scoffed by state biologists and wildlife officials. And there's a huge conspiracy theory that the reason these people will not admit, will not acknowledge, will not document is because if they did in the coal fields or in the timber woods, reported this incredible endangered species and they documented it, then what would happen? Just like in California with the speckled owl or Black Mountain with the dusky mountain salamander, then all of that territory, all that range where these things have been reported and footprints and hair samples would come under the Endangered Lands Act, and there could be no more extraction industry. So I don't know, but that's a theory that I've heard.
So actually, when I was on the police department, we had people that would come into my gun store and they knew who I was, and they had tracks of a mountain lion and they had still pictures. And when they called the DNR, that's what it was called in Indiana, Department of Natural Resources, right? They would not facilitate doing any investigations, and they would debunk everything as a hoax. Now,
Absolutely.
These people had property. These people were honest people, regular civilians, had nothing to gain from it, but they were scared like you're talking about. However, further I looked into it, I was told to keep my nose out of it. And there were new developments going in up on the hill. I'm not going to say where, but up on the hill where these sightings were. And that told me right then and there, I think you're about probably on the same lines as what I was thinking when all this was going down. I ain't going to say what year this was, but it's very interesting to hear this topic.
Well, I talked to Cliff Barackman from Finding Bigfoot when I was working on a Bigfoot project. He was really great guy, great to talk to, but he was interested in the panther thing because he said that when they were filming in Indiana, and this is one of the stories I documented, that the
I know where you're talking about too.
The crew actually saw one. And he said that in the town hall meetings, of course, they were there for Bigfoot stories, but he said almost every town hall meeting, somebody would come up with and have you seen the Black Panthers? We've seen Black Panthers. But he said they didn't deal with that because that wasn't the focus of their show. That's a whole nother ball game. But anyhow, as they've gone across the country, they actually heard stories, didn't document, didn't record, but were told on many occasions about people seeing Black Panther.
Yes, it's very fascinating. I figured that would ring a bell with you.
Yeah, and it makes sense because if you think about it, I mean, Miss Judy knows the Harlan area and all through the mountain ranges through there. Those are major coal producing areas all through those mountains. And if there was an endangered species or an unknown species or something that needed to be studied, absolutely, they would have to shut them down. And that's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? They will not allow that to happen. And I know from personal experience, I've never seen a Black Panther, but on 2 occasions, I've seen wild mountain lions or panthers. One was in Upper Michigan, and it was the same scenario. Like, we owned 80 acres up there. It was our Bible camp and our summer camp and where we would hunt and all this kind of stuff. And twice in that area, my family had seen mountain lions. And we had friends that were DNR people, and we'd tell them. And the response was just kind of like, yeah, we don't talk about that. Kind of a thing, you know. There was one time my dad and I were up there and we were finding new trout streams, right? And so and I was early teens, like maybe 15. We had just come back and sat in the car from checking out this trout stream, and we were sharing a cold soda, and right along my window, maybe 5 yards away, comes walking this mountain lion. And it got to about maybe 10, 15 yards in front of us, and it cut across the road in front of us and then went off into the woods. And we just kind of sat there kind of dumbfounded. And my dad was like, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I saw that." It was an absolutely beautiful animal. But of course, they don't exist in Upper Michigan. So we didn't see anything, And then a few years later, my mother was traveling down a road, and she's in the audience tonight, so she can verify this, traveling on the road towards the camp, and had one cross the road in front of her. And she said there's no mistaking the shape of the animal, the tail at the end, the way they move. There's just no mistaking what these animals are. But again, the DNR wouldn't acknowledge that these things exist up there. And then down here in Florida, where I'm at right now, I've seen them, and they've been seen around my house. And that's not unusual because, yes, they're known to be in Florida. The Florida panther. But
which I
one
think
thing
is
that
hilarious,
gets me,
because why can a panther in Florida go for a stroll and wind up in Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia? I've got a funny story to tell you when you're ready for something funny.
Oh, go ahead, bring it on.
Okay, people say, well, if they're real, then why don't you have a picture? I haven't seen any pictures. Why don't you have a picture? Because I've seen them like on 6 different occasions. Well, one of my friends and I were up on a Bagley Wildlife Management area looking for elk. We were up there to locate and take pictures of elk and wild horses. We did not have black panther on your mind. Nobody goes into the woods thinking, oh, I'm going to go see a black panther today. That's just not how it works. So anyhow, she and I had driven around, on the company road, and we hadn't seen elk. We hadn't seen horses. And we were starting to go back down off the mountain, still daylight. And I saw a big black shape under a bush. And I said, Trish, look, there's a bear. And about that time, it stood up, came out from under the bush, stretched like a house cat. I mean, this thing is huge, like you said, about the size of a German Shepherd, with a long black cylindrical tail, big head, big, sleek, shiny body. Their fur is shiny like glass in the sunlight. And it just stretched like a normal cat would stretch. Walked right in front of us. I had a camera in my hands. She had a camera in her hands. We were so flabbergasted. I mean, absolutely stunned. It looked at the car, looked at us, and took about 2 leaps, was totally across the road, over the embankment, down the other side. There we both sat with our mouths hanging open, camera in my hand, camera in her hand. Neither one of us had enough sense to even click a picture, because it's so unreal that your brain can't even process in that moment. You cannot process what you're looking at because it's not supposed to be there. It'd be like a dinosaur walking out of the woods, Would you say, oh, be still, let me take 10 pictures? No, you'd be so astounded. And that's what that black panther did to us. That was probably about 6 years ago. The last one I saw was 2 summers ago. I saw it cross by the lake. It ran across the bridge up one side from the lake, across a bridge, and down the other side. But anyhow, why don't you get a picture? That's why you don't get a picture.
Yeah. I when people say that, I just kind of look at them like, really? Think about what you just asked for a moment. I said, let me ask you this. If you're driving down the road and that 20-point buck runs across the road in front of you, how come you didn't get a picture of it? Right? Because you can't. Same thing. It's like you don't even think of it. It's not going to happen. So you've seen these things personally, up front, close. You know what they look like. So let me ask you this. what about the people that say, oh, what you're really looking at is a black bobcat? Because bobcats do have a melanistic phase. They can be black. What do you say to those people about what you saw? Could it possibly have been a bobcat, and why or why not?
Listen, I've seen plenty of bobcat, fox. I've pretty much seen a good sampling of everything in these mountains. I'm 72 years old, and I've been out in the woods with a camera for at least the last 40 something years. Well, and even started back in 1970s when I was in college. But if you ever see one, it's like saying if you saw a mouse and you saw a kangaroo, would you confuse those two? Would you possibly think that your mouse was a kangaroo? I had one lady tell me that she was so upset. They tried to tell a forest ranger, and he told her, oh, you didn't see a black panther. You saw a baby bear or you saw a raccoon. And she said, I was so mad, I just wanted to smack him because I know the difference between a raccoon and a black panther.
Yeah,
And
I think most people know the difference between a raccoon and a black cat.
Right?
They're so gorgeous and so unique. I mean, it's like the reason that I know a lot of times when people are telling me the truth and when they're just, BSing their way through is if you're with the person and you see the look in their face, you see the look in their eyes, and they will instantly in their brain will go back to that point of contact where it took place. And there's no way a person can fake that. It's just not. I've seen that with people who've told me Bigfoot tales, and I've seen it in the people who tell me panther tales. Now, I have heard of some people say that they've seen black panther with rosettes under the fur, which would support the jaguar theory. But I've also seen people and talked to people that have seen the pelts that are solid black. When I was a little girl, there was a solid black panther pelt on the side of the barn, and I won't say where, but that's just what people did. If they killed a few raccoons, they tack their hide up on the side of the barn, help cure it out. Well, I remember seeing one that was a black panther, and there were no rosettes. It was just black. Of course, that's been 65 years ago, but I still remember it. And I could take you to every place that I have seen a panther myself. I could take you right back to that point and say, right there's where he came out. There's where he crossed. Here's where I was.
And you bring up a very, very good point that I knew would come up in the conversation because it's very important, is the fact that when you're looking at a melanistic leopard or a melanistic jaguar, the patterns are still there. And in the sunlight, you can see them. If you're up close, you can see them. I have seen black jaguars in the zoo. And when you're looking at them, you see the spotted rosettes. They're there. And yet, if you guys remember our guest a while back, my buddy Jaron Kaiser from Oklahoma, when he had his sighting of something big and black in the woods, he said the same thing. There was no other pattern on it. It was shiny, glossy black. There wasn't anything else on it. Now, he didn't see it well enough to identify it as a black panther. But as we all know, that's what we were leaning to and having that discussion. And that is a very important aspect to remember in these black panther sightings, is when people see them, they're not saying I saw spots on it. They're saying it was jet black, pure black, shiny black, like you said earlier, glossy, like glass. And these are, if we look at all these reports, we can start seeing there is a distinct description to what these animals are. And even with bobcats are marked. They have different types of stripes and patterns.
And no tail.
See that.
No tail. If you see something with a 4 foot long cylindrical tail, it is not a bobcat.
I don't care what color it is. It's not a bobcat. Right. I think I read that the bobcat tails can get up, I want to say 8 inches It may have said 18, but I'm pretty sure it's 8 inches long. And if you've seen a bobcat in the wild, I mean, they're kind of fluffy. They've got tufts of hair. They're hairy. They're not sleek and glossy. There's a
No,
difference, and obviously the structure is different. Their heads are different. Their entire body structure is different. Just because it's a cat doesn't mean it's a viable option.
bobcats have more of the ones that I've seen are more grayish, and they almost look like a gray rabbit fur on a on the bobcat, and then a little little white on their ears and on their tail, maybe on their underbelly, but gray, not black. Now I've done, there you go, thank you. I've done research about melanistic creatures, and there are melanistic deer, melanistic alligators, melanistic fox, rabbits, squirrels, but nowhere in the research does it admit that there is any solid black cat of any size, shape, or except the bobcat. They will say that yes, there's a melanistic bobcat. But there you go. That's
right. But I mean, look at
pictures.
Looking at these pictures that Grizz comes up, I mean, you can see they're structurally different. And how many times have you guys heard me say this? People want to say mistaken identity, but the people that are seeing these things know the animals around them. Right? If you live where you live in Harlan County and in the Appalachian Mountains, you know what bears look like. You know what bobcats look like, because they're part of your, I wouldn't say every day, but they're part of your regular life and experiencing these things. It's like somebody claiming they saw a moose in the area in Kentucky, and people going, nah, you just saw a white-tailed deer. Like, there is distinct differences between a white-tailed deer and a moose. You know what I mean? And to me, it's the same thing. It's the same lazy argument for people trying to debunk something that they don't want to actually accept might really be there. What is okay? Oh, go ahead.
One thing about talking to people who have seen them, they're afraid to come forward depending on who they're talking to. Now, people are pretty good about talking to me because I'm just an ordinary person that, not very intimidating. And I think they probably can sense that I'm asking because I believe it, not because I want to make fun. And so I have interviewed people at events where the crowd was flowing in and out. And I've asked people as they came through, have you ever seen a black panther? And you would be shocked at probably anywhere from 25 to 50%, if not higher, in some events, depends on, what the event is and where it's located, will say, yes, I have. And they, they may stand there and tell you and say, sure, you can put it in a book. Or they may say, I'll tell you, but I don't want my name on it. I don't want to be made fun of, just, I'll tell you the story, and that's a shame. And that's the reason that I began collecting stories, because I got tired of hearing people tell me that they'd been made fun of for telling the truth about what they'd seen. And I decided, you know what? I've been through that. I don't want anybody else to feel like a fool for trying to convey what they've seen in nature. I just don't. So,
and what's wild is that we're not even talking about like Bigfoot. We're not even talking about monsters or anything weird. We're just talking about a black panther. And yet there's still a stigma where these people, like you said, they don't want to be ridiculed for what they experience. And I think that kind of blows my mind, because it's like, really, like, people are going to make fun of people because they saw a black cat. And that just blows my mind that's how it is nowadays. And I think it's ridiculous.
Back to another point that you made about the Appalachian lion and the circus, that they escaped from the circus.
Yeah.
I had a story from a lady in, I believe it was Georgia. And there had been in their region, they had seen those kind of animals. And so I started doing the research on circus trains and circus train wrecks. Well, you'd be surprised how many circus train wrecks there were back in the day when circuses were, riding the rails. And so there's some speculation that black panthers from the circus or lions from the circus got out and interbred with the local cat population. But even so, the African lions, the whatever, circuses weren't hauling around black panthers. Think about it. They had African lions, they had leopards, but I haven't found any reliable source that says there were black panthers on a train that wrecked and got loose.
And it's something to look into genetically. Just because they're all in the cat family does not mean they are able to interbreed and produce viable offspring, right? So even if a lion escaped, or let's say a leopard escaped, and they were somehow able to mate with a mountain lion, like, I'd have to look up if that's even genetically viable. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even know if that could happen, let alone interspecies in the wild. Mating is very rare events, and not impossible, but very rare. You know what I mean? And so that'd be an interesting thing to consider is, would any offspring would there be offspring? And if they were, would they be genetically viable? Because if we look into, crossbreeding of lions and tigers, you have tigons and ligers and stuff like that, depending on which is the male, which is the female. They don't produce a second generation. Like, they produce a cub, but that cub is sterile. It cannot produce anything beyond that. And there's so many health options that they could not survive without the care of humans intervening with them. And so there's definitely some interesting variables there. So that'd be something definitely to look at. One of the things that we hear as far as disputing this is, oh, well, it's always somebody's uncle's cousin's sister that experienced that, right? Like, we've heard that. Oh man, my buddy's mom's uncle one time saw this and blah, blah, blah. But that's not what you're finding. You're getting firsthand, plus your own accounts, your own personal experiences, but you're getting a lot of tales from people saying, I saw this. So that right there kind of throws out the whole idea of it being an urban legend scenario, right? I mean, this is definitely not one of those, my grandpa's uncles happened to run across this critter in the woods.
I have a question for Grizzly.
Yes.
Grizzly, could you look and see if you can pull up Black Panther from India? And I want to be clear, from India, but they still look identical to the creatures that I've seen. If you can, maybe you can pull up a picture, Black Panther from India.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, and so that would be a melanistic leopard. Yep.
And here we go. Action.
That's the one we're familiar with, right, guys? Jungle Book, back in the day, Mowgli, the Black Panther. That would be what this is right here.
Now, does that look like a raccoon? Does that look like a fox?
Well, I would debate you on that. Now, if we're sitting around a campfire drinking some moonshine, maybe. But other than that, no. There's no distinct. When you first said a raccoon, and you told me how you had to restrain yourself. Come on. This is common sense, people.
Now, look at that tail. There is no denying that tail. My mom and I, one year in December, were driving out to town, and on the right side of the road before you got to the dam, there was like a rock face where it had been, cleared away in a ledge. And one of those things was sitting right on the ledge with that big tail hanging down the rock like a jay, just, posing for us as we drove past. My lights hit it, and I was, again, not timed to react because I was driving 40 miles an hour. But there it was, plain as day. Beautiful, beautiful when the headlights hit on it. But the tail is what I remember because it hung down in that J shape.
And that's classic, large cat, jaguars, leopards. They do that. Now, if you look at this picture, and if you can look close on it, if you can see it on a big enough screen, you can still see some of the markings, right?
The little rosette.
And
So you can see them in that picture.
And that's the difference, guys. Even if it's a melanistic leopard or a melanistic jaguar, you're still going to be able to see patterning. And yet what's being cited is they're distinctly saying it's pure black, it's jet black. There's no patterning on it at all. Now, I wouldn't expect that comment from somebody that was just a layperson. You know what I mean? That would just happen to experience a black cat. I don't expect anybody to tell me what they didn't see in a report, right? I expect most people to say, this is what I did see. And only somebody who's actually kind of familiar with the topic would point out the fact that, I didn't see any rosettes. It was very specifically jet black. And I think this is a mystery that is going to be solved at some point. I think it is going to happen. It's going to happen enough times. One is going to be caught.
When they drop one, that's when they're going to get charged. Mark my words.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, I was sure of it, right? Well, it's funny because that's kind of a gray area, right? Because some people say, well, there's no law against hunting this creature because it's not even allowed to exist. But what they don't realize is that the laws don't tell you what you can't hunt. The laws tell you what you're allowed to hunt, right? And so if there's no rule on the books against hunting it, that means there's no rule on the books allowing you to hunt it. So you can still get charged with something, right, Grizz? Is that basically how that works?
Yeah, I bet you there's a federal law somewhere it states that. I guarantee you. It's got to be.
Yeah. Well, just like if you were out hunting for a Bigfoot and you shot a Bigfoot, they would say, you didn't have the legal right to shoot this. There's no Bigfoot season. Therefore, you shot it illegally.
Look at Florida.
Same thing with a black panther.
I called the FWC or whatever they're called down there in Florida, you all have. I called them live on the show. And I'm like, I want to know what a skunk ape is because I'm going hunting. And they would not tell me what a definition is.
Uh-huh.
So.
Because, I mean, that's how laws are worded with loopholes and everything. And it's unfortunate. Crystal, you are absolutely right. I mean, I'm not against hunting. I'm not a hunter now, but used to be a hunter. I'm not against hunting in any way, shape, or form. But at the same time, hunting needs to be a functional thing. And hunting one of these creatures is not, in my opinion, acceptable. With the caveat of any mountain lion type creature, if it's causing death and destruction and poses a danger to humans, then I think that would be allowable. But just to be hunting something is not cool in my book that way at all. Are you still getting, I know you're on different book projects now, Miss Judy, and I've been following you on Facebook and I love what you're doing. We can, give you some promos here at the end without a problem. Are you still out collecting and receiving new reports to this day? Like, is this still happening?
I have heard many reports since I did the last book. I've done 3 separate Panther Tales and Panther Tales 2 and Panther Tales 3. And I had so many, I felt like I had proven the point to anybody that had seen one and just needed some support. I've probably heard enough stories to have halfway filled another book, but I am not actively working on one right now. But I've seen the comments coming across. I've been reading those as they went across the screen. Mm-hmm. You got a lot of viewers that have stories that need to be told. Mm-hmm. So I'm not opposed. If I got enough stories, I'm not opposed to doing volume number 4.
See, and I thought you had already had like 4 or 5, honestly, for some reason.
Have 3 and 2 Bigfoot documents, the same thing, stories gathered.
Okay.
But I've also considered doing a book of a combination of any unusual creature or event that people have seen in the woods. Now, I'm a hunter with my camera. I hunt with my camera. I have a license to carry a concealed weapon, so I may have a pistol with me or on me for protection, just in case of the most unexpected thing. But my hunting is always with a camera.
You know what they say, you don't mess with a girl from Appalachia. That's exactly what they're talking about, guys. She's packing.
Well, some places.
So your books. Go ahead.
Some places that I go in the backwoods, you'd be crazy not to.
It's true.
Oh, I know. I'll get messages from Jen sometimes and go, "You never guess where me and Miss Judy went." And I'm like, you know what? Probably not. Probably not. Now, your books aren't research books, right? You're basically just relaying the stories. Like you said, basically recording them, right? You're not putting in scientific research, and you're not doing this stuff into your books as much as you are recording people's stories. Is that an accurate description?
I've written all different kinds of books, but on this particular venue,
just on Black Panthers.
I'm a story gatherer. It's important to me for people's voices their stories that would otherwise be lost forever. It's important to me to get those in print for the person's sake, for our culture's sake, for the future's sake.
And I think that is commendable, and I think we need more authors like that preserve the cultural heritage of our country. Where can our audience find you to report their own stuff, or where can they get your books if they're interested? How can we get a hold of you?
Amazon.com has my books that are currently in print, and then my name's up there. I'm on Facebook. That would be the fastest way to catch me, on Facebook. But anybody interested in the Panther books or the Bigfoot books, they're available on Amazon.
Awesome.
Yep. And if you guys check out my friends list, you can find Miss Judy on there. She's on there as well. Like I said, we've been friends for several years now. I always enjoy talking with you guys. Check out her books. They're awesome. She gifted me several of them when I was down for the count with COVID. And I really appreciate them. Those were definitely in my library. I've got all my books stored now. But I don't remember how many you gave me. I know you gave me the Bigfoot books. I got the Panther books, and I think there was a couple more in there. And this was several years ago, so I'm kind of drawing a blank but I remember thoroughly enjoying the stories and just the idea of Black Panthers being real. People are seeing them, guys. This is a cryptid by very definition of what a cryptid is, an unknown animal that's known by locals but unproven by science. This is the very definition of what a cryptid is in our country. And I am confident that someday, hopefully soon, that they will be officially recognized as a species in our country. Miss Judy, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes,
we greatly appreciate it. I know it was last minute, very last minute, literally a few hours before the show, we were able to confirm everything. I have another great guest that I'm working on getting in. He's been very busy, so it's been hard to schedule. We were going to try and get him on tonight, and he's like, oh, well, I got this going on. I got this going on. I might be able to drive out. And I'm like, you know what, dude, we'll grab another week. It's okay. I know you're super busy, but he wants to come on. So that's going to be a great show. I'm not going to tell you who he is, but it will be Bigfoot related, skunk ape related down here in Florida. I do have some other projects coming on, guys. Grizz, I want to talk about real quick. I'm thinking about following the footsteps of a lot of my other co-hosts and putting together a Facebook page specifically for rabbit holes. And so we can put stuff on there. You guys can comment. You can ask questions through there. I know it's just another Facebook page, and every one of us have one, but that's okay. I think it'll be a good idea. Got some other projects in the works, guys, that we'll announce as we're doing. Trying to keep busy down here in Florida while I'm waiting on my disability and trying to keep something happening. So look forward to the future, guys. We're going to have some great shows coming up. I'm putting together some stuff. We got great guests coming up. So keep watching, keep in tune, and we'll see what's coming up in the future.
And from coast to coast, around the world, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap. We'll catch you tomorrow. Take care and bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.